Hey guys, good morning, welcome back. Today's going to be a bit of a long video, I think, because what I want to do is I want to rebuild the shocks on the front of my Iris 1.1 front wheel drive. I've been running it indoors for the last weekend or two, and I moved to the alu chassis with the internal springs. I've got the silver internal springs in here. And what I want to do is I actually want to test them this weekend on the same track without the springs in. So I'm going to obviously be changing the wipers, pistons, and I'll do a shock rebuild, and I'll show you how I do it, what I do, tips and tricks, and that sort of things. So yeah, let's get started. I've removed the shocks from the car. That's the first thing to do. And now I'm going to take the link off for the ride height. Just loosen the screw and just slide it off. What I like to do is I like to put everything on one side, because I have confused myself with which is left and right. Especially on the wiper arms, I've confused the hell out of myself sometimes. And what I've actually done on the shocks is I've just put a Rex 4, if that is in Dutch, right front, and on this one. Oh, it's wiped off, but there was left front on this one. So what we do is I take the arms off, and then I will undo the screws just to take the shock cap off. You probably can't see what I'm doing here because of my lovely blue medical gloves. I've got gloves on because I absolutely hate doing shocks, and I hate getting oil on my fingers. So I just do it this way, you know. Make sure you've got plenty of paper or kitchen roll or that sort of stuff kicking around, because the oil will go everywhere. What I'll do is I'll show you how I do one shock, and obviously it's going to be the same for the other side. So last screw, take it out carefully. So obviously I've got it at an angle here. I like to keep a clean piece of paper, everything, and then I'll grab another piece of paper as well. And this is where I take it all off. So what I do is I just loosen the cap, just lift the cap off, lay the shock flat, and then you get the O-ring, the seal, and the shock cap. I like to take the seal off and just wipe all the old oil off of everything. Yeah, just make sure everything is nice and clean. I mean, these shocks were rebuilt 2 weeks ago, I think. So the oil is still fresh, clean, no dirt and crud in there. Sometimes you'll see, especially when you've been racing outdoors all season, or for a long time between shock builds, that the oil will be dirty. Okay, the next thing to do is to pull the wiper out, the piston out. What I like to do is I take a pair of pliers, and I just grab it lightly where the spring goes in, and I just pull gently up, yeah, and then let's set it down on the rag. Okay, this lifts the shock out, and as you can see, I've got the option one in with the soft spring. Take the plastic bushing off, and then leave this to one side. I've got a little. I'm going to put that in there because I'm going to wash everything off in a cup. Turn the shock upside down. Okay, and then what I'd like to do is just take a little 1.5mm Allen key, pop the seal out, and drop that in there as well. Okay, we've got getting all the oil out. I take now a small flat-headed screwdriver, and I just like to take the small nylon insert out, and then drop it into here, and I'll take some brake cleaner, and I'll just add a little bit of brake cleaner to it. Make sure you don't add any rubber into this, because rubber will react really badly to brake cleaner. My brake cleaner's off. Okay, don't need a lot. Just give it a shake about, okay, and then leave it to soak for a second or two. Yeah, just give the rubber ring a clean, and the gasket thing. Just give them a shake out. Doesn't need long. And all this does is it just, if there is any crud or anything anywhere, so there is a little bit, it'll just clean it off. Makes putting the shock back together that little bit cleaner. Yeah, and then take a little screwdriver and just pull the nylon out and the smaller nylon out, and then I take the piston also out of the brake cleaner, come here. Okay, just grab my finger. Right. There we go. Okay, so nylon, the small one, the big one, the piston, the shock housing. Just blow everything off. Try and get your cloth into it. Just give it a little bit of dry off. The brake cleaner will evaporate. That's not a problem. Then just clean the wiper. Okay. As you can see, by the time this video goes out, these parts will be available to everybody. This focus. This silver spring here, I don't know if you can see it there. This silver spring is 7mm long. We as team have been testing this for a few months, and we've actually found that it works really, really well, especially in the front wheel drive, in the rear. And what happens is with the 7mm spring, it's actually touching the bottom of the shock shaft when it's in rest. So actually the progression begins from 0. Whereas the normal 5mm spring only works after 2mm, and obviously the 3mm spring will only work after so many millimeters of movement. We have been testing this. Works really, really well. I would advise you, if you're running the fronty, to put them in the rear, just the soft ones. And if you're running the touring car, just check what the touring car guys are running for setup. I don't run touring car yet, so yeah. Give them a try, they're great. Okay, everything's clean. Just want to clean the brake cleaner off of this one. Because obviously, like I say, brake cleaner and rubber don't go together. So, there we go, clean. And then I put the gasket back on. Sorry, yeah, the gasket back on. And I put my O-ring back in. Okay. And then we're done. Right, and then what you need to do is you need to check. Obviously, this is the left front shock, so you need to make sure you're using the left wiper. Okay, when you've got it like that, it will sit like that, so that when you hold the shock flat, the spring mount is flat as well. Yeah, you do not want the other side. Yeah, it will fit, but if you look, when the shock's mounted on the car, the spring mount is diagonal. Okay, just make sure you're fitting the right side. When I started with the Iris, I confused myself a couple of times. But just make sure when you just test it before you put the oil in, make sure you've got the right side. Okay, another thing to do is you can always write on here, left front, right front. But then what I like to do is I like to put the nylon inserts onto the spring like that, and there we go. Okay, and now the messy bit. I'm going to put some 450 oil in the fronts. It's what I was running. It's what I like to use indoors. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to half fill the shock with oil. Okay. Now, then what we do is we take our shock, our piston, with the parts on it, and then we just slide it in and just let it fall through the oil. Give it a little push. Okay. Push the plastic upper bush in, yeah, and then we need to add a little bit more oil, just a few drops. Okay, and now it's covering the piston. What I like to do is I just like to move it a little bit. This will make a right mess. Just like to move it down a little bit, just so the oil goes into the top, and then move it back a little bit more. Yeah, this is a little bit easier without the spring because it doesn't springs back. Okay, there we go. And what you'll see is this, the oil is actually over the level of the shock. This is quite important because when you put the cap on, what you don't want is too little oil in the shock, because then you'll introduce air. If it's overfilled, yeah, like it is now, and what I also do is just put a little bit around the shock shaft like that, yeah. And then what happens now is, okay, you're going to waste some and it's going to be quite messy. But what you're now ensuring is that there is no air in the shock. There's a little tiny air bubble there. There we go. I'll just pick that air bubble out with a screwdriver. And what you're now going to check, make sure, is that there's no air in the shock. That's obviously, for every radio control car, it's important not to have air in your shocks, and our Iris is exactly the same. So what I found the easiest is to just overfill so that all the aluminium on the top is full. And then slide the shock cap over the top carefully. Just make sure it goes down nicely. And what you'll see is the oil is now splurging out the side and through the shock holes. Okay, I'll clean my fingers. You don't want a dirty tool, do you? So we get the 1.5, and then what I'll do is I'll just put a couple in. Okay, put one in there. One in there. Don't tighten them all the way down. Yeah, push the shock a little bit. And then the next one. Oh, I'm not very handy with rubber gloves on. Take the next one and screw that one down as well. Obviously, I'm not tightening anything up yet because I want to make sure that everything goes in nicely. If you tighten one screw up, the problem then is the shock cap could be a little bit twisted on the shock itself. So what I like to do is I like to leave the shock flat and then just tighten all of the screws down a little bit. They don't have to be super tight, these. Just a little bit of a nip. Okay, there we go. No particular order really. I like to do them cross. Left, right, and up and down. Okay. And then once you've got them all tight, just check them all. Don't go and over tighten them, please, because remember the shock body is aluminium and you can't tear the threads out. So that's finished. Okay, it is very messy now. So what I like to do now is just wipe everything off with an old piece of paper towel. Okay. Make sure everything's nice and clean. Also in here, where the indent is, where it mounts on the chassis, just give it a bit of a wipe like that. Right. And then what I like to do is I like to then take my pliers and listen while I'm holding the shock shaft. Okay. And what you do is if you hold it like this, yeah, and move the shock body while listening, you shouldn't hear any air. If the shock makes a noise, yeah, then you've got air in. Okay. This one is absolutely perfect. Okay. Just things to watch out for. Okay. If you don't remove the bottom nylon bush when you put the oil in, there can be, especially when you build them new, there can end up being air caught underneath it, and that will introduce obviously air into the shock. Please check to make sure that that's out when you're rebuilding them, and when you're building the shocks new, if you've just got your kit, make sure you don't put that in before you put your first oil in. And just like I say, half fill it first and then slide the wiper in and then top it up. That's the most important thing. Obviously cleanliness is godliness. Keeping them clean on the way in when you're taking it apart. The more crud and troop and shit that you get out of the shock before you rebuild them, the better it will be. The quality will stay better. I do have to admit, once I've rebuilt my shocks, I mean, I ran them all year last year outside with 350 oil, and the only time I rebuilt them was after ETS, and that was because the car had spent 4 days on the track, probably 5 days actually on the track, without me even looking at the car. So yeah, that was that. The shocks are great. They don't let any air in, anything like that. So the only time you really need to change your oil is when you're changing thickness. And then obviously the last thing you need to do is to put the wiper back on for the ride height, and then you just slide that over the top. The aluminium always goes upwards, carbon down towards the shock. Tighten that up nicely. Again, don't over tighten because it's aluminium, and just check that everything works, and we're done. So that's how you build a shock. on the Iris 1.1, 1.05. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Give us a like, give us a thumbs up. Again, any questions, stick them in the comments and I'll respond to you. Cheers guys, bye bye for now.